It's a real joy to be able to share with you my thoughts about two very similar ideologies, Ubuntu and Seva. Ubuntu comes from the Bantu languages of South Africa, and although it is difficult to translate literally into English, Ubuntu has many translations, but one of them that I think will resonate with people, which is I am because we are. And what it speaks to is an ideology that talks about personhood, that I am because we are, and we are connected. You and I are connected. So it speaks to some universal truths that somewhere in the back of our minds, and more importantly than our minds, in the back of our beings, we understand about what it is to be human. And that is very, very simple, that I am connected to you, you are connected to me. My behavior, my way of being, what I do has implications not just for me, but for other people. And so we are connected. And if we look at Seva, which is a Sanskrit word, and it comes from the Indian tradition of selfless service. Selfless service requires that the leader is courageous, number one, that the leader acts, or the person giving service, which is not always somebody who is in a leadership position, because Seva is conceptualized as a way of being, that if I give Seva, if I am Seva, then what I do is to develop my own spirituality as a human being. It enables me to live at a higher level of humanity, as well as contribute to the community. So whilst it is selfless in terms of putting others first and working in the interest of the greater good, it is not completely selfless, because it's also about me developing my spirituality, because it goes back to an Ubuntu that says that I am connected to other people. Why am I offering this? And you know, it would take much longer than this presentation gives time to do, to talk about Ubuntu and Seva. Why am I offering this? I'm offering this because I want to offer something concrete. I want to offer something concrete that comes from two different cultural paradigms that could offer something to a Western view of leadership. And it is neat in that it comes with the fact that we are looking for more people from African and Asian backgrounds to look at leadership positions. Now, there are some things that I am not taking for granted here, so let me be clear about it from the start. I am not in any way assuming that because you look like me, or because you're an Asian person, we all think the same, we are homogeneous human beings, and all of us are going to gravitate towards something called Ubuntu or something called Seva. I'm not in any way, shape or form taking that for granted. But I am saying to those people who come from diverse backgrounds, who want to think about leadership differently, and would like to explore what other ideologies have to offer, I am offering Ubuntu and Seva as two of many different ways, different prisms that you could look at in terms of leadership. And the other thing that's making me smile as I talk about Ubuntu and Seva from my own experience in the UK is that I have seen Ubuntu in particular operate in areas in the UK, and particularly I would like to draw your attention to the review that I did in Darlington called Schools at One Darlington, and it is one of the papers that will inform this training that you are on and will be made available to you if you haven't got it already. And the reason that I smile is whenever I think about schools at One Darlington, I think about the 33 head teachers, all of them white, not African, not Asian, in England, in Darlington, at a time when they decided that they were going to operate collectively in the interests of Darlington children. And when they wanted to define the ideology that underpinned their way of operating and working together, read the document, it will tell you, they defined it as Ubuntu. They defined it as a way of looking at how they lead their schools. In this particular instance, we're talking about head teachers running schools, how they led their schools in the interests of Darlington children at a time when the marketization of education in Britain was at its height and academies were the way to go. And at this particular time, Darlington had more academies for a tiny local authority than any other local authority in the country. But they went against the tide in terms of what academies were supposed to do. Academies were not for them about survival of the fittest. Academies for them was about them using their independence as great schools and as good schools to work interdependently. And so they set up a trust. And one of the first things that they said was that we will not compete against each other for children within Darlington. We will not compete against each other in terms of service. We will collaborate, we will cooperate. And so they merged Ubuntu ideology with cooperative principles, which many in Northern England will be very, very familiar with as part of their cultural tradition. And cooperative principles are about people working collaboratively and connected together. So what am I saying then in bringing to a close this section about Ubuntu and Seva? What I'm actually saying is that we can draw on global paradigms, merge them with Western ways of thinking to address some of the challenges that we have today in the present. And part of the way that we defeat ourselves as diverse people and as people who have wide traditions and cultures that we can draw on is to always be holding up Western models as the only way. And if there is one thing I think we can agree on, is that the current way is not working. It is not working. It is not working in the interests of those that we serve, and it is certainly not working in terms of leaders making a difference to the majority. So let's look at something different. Let's be brave like the Darlington head teachers. Let's look outside of what we've normally been taught to believe. And let's look inside to what it is to be a human being. These are universal truths. They are not something that just belongs in one particular culture. But let us look at what that means and then draw up ideologies that work within our work context. For me, it's really key that African and Asian people and anybody from diverse backgrounds brings themselves into the work occasion, the work situation. It's very important for us to do that. And how we do that is by defining ourselves professionally, at least in part with who we are culturally. To leave who we are culturally outside of the professional prism is to rob ourselves and those that we serve and those that we lead of the best of who we are. And why would we do that? If you'd like to read a little more about Ubuntu, then there are many people from the African tradition that you can look at who have spoken about Ubuntu. Nelson Mandela being one, Desmond Tutu being another. Even former President Barack Obama talks about Ubuntu and what it is and what it means. And I particularly like this quote from Desmond Tutu. A person with Ubuntu is open and available to others, affirming of others, does not feel threatened that others are able and good, for he or she has a proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that he or she belongs in a greater whole, and is diminished when others are diminished or humiliated. So when working with the Darlington heads at schools at One Darlington, it was wonderful to get quotes like this one from the executive director of Longfield Academy at the time. And he was musing on this trust that the Darlington heads had set up, and how in many respects it was challenging because it presented a different way of working. They were accountable first and foremost to each other as head teachers, and definitely accountable to the community that they served. But what he said of the way of working is that he liked the spirit of collaboration that he found in Darlington. It suited my disposition, he said. All of my fellow heads there have strengths, and we were prepared to sit around the table and work out a set of shared values and beliefs that was in the interests of Darlington students, and work together for the common good. It might sound like a cliche, but that is exactly what we did. And he ended by saying it was unique as a professional to use our independence as individual head teachers of individual schools to work interdependently within the family of schools that served Darlington. So for me, Ubuntu has real resonance in that it provides an opportunity for leaders who are predisposed to work collaboratively, who are predisposed to work in the interest of the greater good, to find a mechanism via which they can do so. So Seva is a South Asian paradigm, and it is about selfless service. But this selfless service is rooted in three things. First of all, it's rooted in courage and action. You have to critically analyze the context in which leadership is taking place, and as a result of that critical analysis, you need to take action, and that action requires courage, because often the action that you are taking is going against the status quo. It is disrupting the status quo, and it is often giving a voice to those who have no voice. It is about being an advocate for the majority. And so whilst Seva sounds good in terms of selfless service, I like the edge that it has. It takes a lot of morality and courage to stand up and go against the status quo. It takes a lot. And so it isn't something for the faint-hearted or for the weak or for the soft. It is actually for those who have a spine of steel and are rooted and grounded in what it is to be a decent human being. So I would say to you that consider how you could use Seva as a way to even begin to think about your current service delivery. It doesn't have to be a major ideological overhaul. It has to be as a very simple way of doing things differently that you can convey to other people, and other people can understand. If you think about how major changes in policy take place, and this again may be a different way to traditionally how we have seen things take place, it takes place around people who can create new narratives around which people can cohere. Please don't underestimate the importance of story and the importance of pulling together a story that people believe in and a way of being that people aspire to be. And this is what Seva offers us. This is what Seva offers us. So why not combine? Why not combine Seva, Ubuntu, cooperative principles, whatever it is that we need to combine to create a new way of working?